This is Face the State with CBS 21's Rob Hanrahan and featuring political insiders Mark Singal and Charlie Giroux.
Good morning and welcome to Face the State. I'm Rob Hanrahan. A special edition of the show today, taking a look back at what our lawmakers focused on in 2018. Each week, we get the opportunity to watch the process unfold.
It's one of the biggest jobs legislators take on every year, deciding how to spend taxpayer money. The debate started early in 2018, along with the governor's budget address.
So we believe it's a modest budget proposal. We believe that we've taken steps in prior years and with this proposed budget to restrain spending. And again, we think it's a budget that ought to, our legislative friends ought to be able to work with us to enact in a timely manner.
Charlie, got time for one more?
Real quick, I mean, this is a beginning point, not an ending point. We all agree on that. So I guess the question to follow up on Mark's is this. It's nearly a $1 billion ask. How close to that do you think we're going to be come June 30th? And Governor Wolf has never signed a budget. Do you believe that he'll have one this year that he will sign?
Look, we hope to sign the budget. Again, we hope to get something enacted on time.
Why do you think the governor is so awestruck with taxing natural gas and not so awestruck with taxing, for example, the timber that he makes his cabinets out of?
Well, I can't speak for the governor and to his choices, but the idea behind the other issue is with Marcellus is the fact that our impact fee goes down every year because it's based on the length of the production, but also the length and the age of the well. Right. So we need to take a look at how that is done. But why he's after one of our leading industries and job providers, I can't answer that question.
Mark?
Well, we've had this discussion.
Yes.
many times, but it's the low-hanging fruit. We have an abundance of natural gas in Pennsylvania. We're blessed to be able to have it, and every other.
How about the shale extraction tax?
I don't think the shale extraction tax will be part of the conversation as we go forward. There's not very little discussion about that. Similarly, there's other proposals the governor put into place dealing with, for example, local communities paying for state police protection when they don't have their own police department. That's likely to fall off the table as well. But despite that, I think we're okay with our revenue picture. We have to scale back our spending to accommodate what we have with respect to revenue, and we'll do that. But the governor's priorities, I think, will be part of this conversation, and our priorities as well.
That's big news. That's the first I've heard.
Yeah,
those two items are probably just not going to be talked about.
Yeah, well, I'll probably let the cat out of the bag a little bit there, but at the end of the day, that's not where things are headed right now. But I do think that we're going to reach agreement probably before June 30th.
We did come together. It's an election year, so it makes it easier for people to try and come to an agreement. But we have got to understand, Pennsylvania's economy is not growing as fast as it needs to. We got a lot more work to do.
After the budget passed, lawmakers turned their attention to other battles, including one that dominated the end of the year, reforming the statute of limitations. Attorney General Josh Shapiro released his grand jury report over the summer. It details the sexual abuse of children at the hands of priests in the Catholic Church spanning decades.
The current civil statute is age 30. The criminal statute is age 50, which puts Pennsylvania in the middle of protecting kids as far as the statute of limitations go. I want Pennsylvania to be the best at protecting kids. What else do we need? We had Cosby, Sandusky, the Boy Scouts, the Catholic Church scandal. In-home abuse is actually most of the sexual abuse that happens. So, you know, these statutes, it's pertinent that we eliminate them, that there is no statute. I believe...
No statute at all.
That's right.
And you're not just talking about victims of the church. You're talking about all
victims.
Sex abuse victims.
I don't care if you're a victim from a Catholic priest, Jerry Sandusky, your teacher, your father, your mother. We want to hold all pedophiles and perpetrators responsible.
I think the bill that has gone over to the House from the Senate, I think there's already been a couple amendments that were to that original bill. I have a feeling, given how this is a front and center issue, that there's probably going to be more discussion surrounding how this bill shapes up in final version. And I, quite frankly, wouldn't be surprised if the Senate gets it back from the House with some changes.
What would be a deal breaker is if we removed that 2-year window. Now, you have in your possession an opinion from the Attorney General, and you've seen people declare pretty affirmatively that it is in fact constitutional. Do you feel comfortable saying, look, if we arrive at some language that keeps the 2-year window but allows us some of these changes we're looking for, can we get there?
We'll see. I mean, look, as I said, I'm committed to making sure that these victims get their chance to seek justice, to point out their abusers,
and to get their day in court, as you said. I'm committed to that. I'm committed to having them the ability to seek some compensation, although I think that's less important to them than identifying their accusers or their abusers. So we're going to work. I'm working with Senator Costa, the Democrat leader in the House. This isn't a partisan issue. Working with the Attorney General very closely to get to a product where we all feel comfortable that works.
Despite pressure from the victims' advocates, the state Senate never took up the bill before the end of the 2018 session. Representative Mark Rozzi has vowed to keep fighting. Another constitutional amendment that state lawmakers considered regarding their own jobs. They answered the question, should we cut the size of the legislature?
The most important part of this bill is that in the end, the people of Pennsylvania will make the decision as to whether we will continue to be at 203 or whether we will go to 151. That's the most important thing, and I remind my colleagues of this all the time. It's a very simple bill. I mean, it basically reduces the size of the House of Representatives from 203 to 151 because of the fact that it's a constitutional amendment. It's a very long path.
What happened with this bill was there was an amendment that took the Senate out of this. It had included reducing the Senate to 38 seats. Is that your amendment?
Well, what my amendment did is take the Senate out and put it back to its original form.
In 50?
Yeah, to keep it the same so when it goes back to the House, it would be in the same format, which we have to do for 2 consecutive sessions.
Okay, well, is that fair to downsize the House and not the Senate?
Well, I think what we're trying to do is just make the House more manageable. You know, you look at Pennsylvania, we've got the second largest and the second most expensive legislature in the entire nation, and I don't think anyone could make a rational argument that we have the second best laws in the nation here in Pennsylvania because our legislature is so large. There's no reason it can't be smaller. Most other states that are comparable to us in population have a smaller legislature.
What's the buzz? I mean, it has to be consecutive. Do you think it'll run?
Unfortunately, I'm not optimistic. I don't think it's going anywhere in the few remaining days that are left in the session.
In the end, Representative Bloom was right. Supporters will have to begin again next session. Another focus for Pennsylvania lawmakers, shaped by a national tragedy, the Valentine's Day massacre at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, creating a push for legislation to improve school safety and address possible changes to gun control.
The question is where you draw that line. And some people say, I think it ought to be drawn on this side of assault weapons, and other people say it ought to be drawn on that side of assault weapons. But that's where the debate needs to be focused, not about whether or not you're for the Second Amendment or not. I mean, I own guns. I don't think people should be walking around with assault weapons on the street. There may be other people that say, oh, I think that's perfectly fine, but that's where the debate needs to occur, not are you for guns or are you against guns?
Pennsylvania, the state, and the federal level, they seem to be in the process of throwing money at this school safety issue right now, but not really defining how it's going to be used.
Right. And there's a lot of things people can do. I've talked to security firms, and it's interesting. One of the first things they do, they say when they go into a building, people, when you go into, we can all imagine what a lot of the school buildings look like. You go into the office area, it's usually encased with glass, but a lot of times they'll have posters up there. Right. And they'll say, look, get these posters off the glass. That's visibility for you. And it's not for the guy coming in with the gun. It's for the bullying, for the drug deals, for all sorts of things that happen every day at the school. And then where bad things happen in the school, make sure teachers are there in between class periods. Things like that you can do that don't cost any money. And then you look at, do we need a camera system? What kind do we need? If you need one at all, because usually they're after the fact. A lot of people put these things up and they have a false sense of security because they think, we spent a lot of money, we did this.
Right.
And does it really help?
We traveled around the state. You know, I was put as part of a task force for school safety, and we traveled around the state with the policy committee, with Senator Argel, and you know, we listened to administrators, we listened to teachers, listened to cops, security officers, and that was one of the things that was talked about the most, was the mental health aspect of it, and obviously very important. And you know, end up being part of the bill. And you know, obviously people are struggling. They may act out, and if they are in a school environment, you know, unfortunately that puts kids' lives in jeopardy. So we want to make sure that you know, teachers have the training to identify people who may be struggling, and then if they are struggling and you're going to remove them from the school, you know, what's the plan to get them help and then ultimately get them back into school?
The task force released their report in November, detailing 9 school safety reforms that have been enacted in PA since the tragedy in Florida. 10 related bills could also be reintroduced next session.
The issues of 2018. After months of campaigning, some candidates in this past year's elections found themselves suddenly in new districts. A look back at the debate on redistricting and our election coverage coming up next.
This is Face the State with CBS 21's Rob Hanrahan and featuring political insiders Mark Singal and Charlie Giroux.
This year's midterm election saw voter turnout reach a 50-year high across the country. Throughout months of debate on redistricting, our team here at Face the State helped make sure you knew the candidates.
Before the primary election in May, the state Supreme Court struck down districts that had been established in 2011, prompting debate on how redistricting should be handled, and Senate Bill 22.
Now, at the 11th hour, the Supreme Court has invalidated that map. And while there's some constitutional questions about that process, if the map's been in effect for 3 years, what does the confusion curse the governor? You've got people who literally have been running in some of these seats for up to a year that are suddenly out of these seats. What does that mean? For me, it's a much clearer and concise argument. The federal Constitution says the state legislatures have that ability to redraw lines. So while if you adopt that position, I don't think it's inconsistent to say the courts can perhaps invalidate the map for unconstitutional reasons. I think they had some of the same concerns as to why I didn't support the map. But then the remedy, and I'll quote Justice Max Baer, who's a Democrat, the remedy borders on being unconstitutional.
We want to create an independent commission. We amended it in committee, we got it out of committee, and now we're going to get it before the full Senate for a vote coming up when we get back into session.
Okay, for those not familiar with it, a constitutional amendment has to go through the Senate twice.
Right, so we would just be beginning this cycle. And we're kind of under the gun here because our new maps are going to be drawn up very shortly in the next couple of years.
After the 2020
exactly.
census.
So by getting this done and such, we can have the new process in place.
The Senate then added an amendment to that redistricting bill that would change how judges are elected. Those judicial reforms remain under debate. The weeks leading up to the spring primary saw nail-biters for gubernatorial candidates looking to take on incumbent Governor Tom Wolf.
I've been in the Senate for 4 years, and I watched the dysfunction between the current Lieutenant Governor and Governor Wolf. And also I know the task at hand with solving a lot of the issues in Pennsylvania is going to be large. So I had an opportunity to meet Jeff last year, and I got to know him more and more. And at one point I said to myself, it's really a shame he's running for the Senate because he would be a great candidate for Lieutenant Governor. And I come from the private sector, and I'm not used to having my teammates picked for me. I like to pick my own team.
Every successful business enterprise that I've been involved with has two things: a business plan and a budget. Pennsylvania has neither. I would get both of those things in place, and then I would start getting things done pursuant to that plan rather than just talking about them.
We've lost jobs the last 9 months in a row. We've lost 100,000 of our population in the last couple of years. That's not good for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. How are we going to do it? 4 or 5 things. One, we have the highest corporate state tax rate in the country. It's about 10%. We have proposed to lower it to 3.07. Roll back the oppressive regulations. I can't talk to a single business person in Pennsylvania without them talking about just how oppressive the Department of Environmental Protection, PennDOT, labor and industry are.
The voters spoke at the primaries, and Scott Wagner and Jeff Bartos came out on top. Wagner leaving his state Senate seat up for grabs.
I think there's 3 really important issues facing the constituents in the 28th senatorial district. I think overall, the economy. We are very heavily taxed in Pennsylvania.
And I think it's really important to have people in Harrisburg that have actually been responsible and accountable to employees and running a business. I think the skill sets you learn about setting a budget, balancing a budget, accountability, responsibility, building consensus, all of those things are needed up in Harrisburg.
When this seat opened up, I felt like all of the cards had come into play, and I needed to step up because that would be another way that I could help my community to take it forward and to help my constituents as well.
What's most important is that we get a fair funding model for schools in Pennsylvania, and that we look to educators and the administration of schools that are really doing it right and come up with a good model that works.
Republican Kristen Phillips Hill won that primary and, flash forward to the fall, the Senate seat as well. In the weeks before the midterm, we also heard from candidates looking to be a voice for Pennsylvania in Washington, D.C.
I agreed with the president on his first major action, which was the health care repeal. It was the ACA repeal, and it was the bill that Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House, a Republican, obviously brought out and demanded with the president that we all voted for. It was a binary choice. It was this or nothing, no amendments allowed, and I was one of the folks that said, absolutely not. This is not what we promised the voters. This is not what I promised my voters, and more to the fact that it didn't do what we said it was going to do.
I support, at the end of the day, everyone having affordable, accessible, quality health care. That's the state that we need to achieve. And what we need to do in the short term is we need to stabilize the current system, because the Affordable Care Act has been destabilized by specific actions of the current Congress. And we need to also look at making sure that we are protecting and preserving care for those with pre-existing conditions.
We need to ensure we fund our military. They have been very badly underfunded for a long period of time. A bill that we advanced provided a pay raise for the military that hadn't been given in a long, long time. But we also need to ensure they have the best equipment and the best resources and tools for them to do their jobs. They're fighting for us, risking their lives for us every day. The least that we can do is make sure that they're properly equipped.
I think we need to run as people who are committed to people, first and foremost, over special interests. And so we have to start with the way we're running our campaigns. And I think if you're contrasting me with my opponent on this one and see how much money he's gotten from corporate PACs, how much outside spending from special interest groups have supported him to get elected in the past, that's a huge difference that you see.
Right now, as we speak, 4,000 people are rushing through Mexico to get here. It's pretty obvious to everyone that we don't want to secure the borders. They don't want to secure the borders. Not only is Senator Casey for catch and release, which is basically there is no border. You get caught, you get released, and you're good to go. He's going to go a step further and support a sanctuary city. So not only do you get caught and released, then you run to Philadelphia, and now you're protected.
We had a bipartisan immigration bill in 2013, which would have secured the border for sure with the best technology and the best policies, and would allow us to fix a broken system. But Charlie, my view of Republicans is they don't want to fix this system. They've had power now for 2 years. They have House, Senate, and President. They've run the House for 8 years. They've had the Senate for 4 years. They don't want to fix it. They want a political issue to demonize people and divide people. And it's not working out for them, because people want us to solve problems, whether it's health care or immigration or lifting wages.
When November 6th came, we saw more than a dozen seats flip at the state level, and Governor Tom Wolf claimed victory once again. Plus, Democratic U.S. Senator Bob Casey and the two Republican congressmen we just heard from all retained their seats.
Well, we've reviewed this past year a little bit, but what lies ahead for 2019? We've got my amazing team here. We have John, we have Mark, we have Charlie, we have RJ. When we come back, we're going to talk about what's ahead for 2019 in Pennsylvania. Stick around. We'll be right back with more on Face the State. The gang's all here. WHP 580's RJ Harris is here, along with Charlie Giroux, my Republican strategist, Democratic strategist Mark Single, and from the Patriot News Pen Live, John Misick. Let's just toss this out there, guys, because toward the end of last year, of 2018, and this program will be on the week before, but the governor suddenly decided, RJ, that he thinks we're ready for recreational marijuana. Could that become the 2019 issue?
No, it's going to go down in flames pretty quickly, but I found it amazing that the governor spoke to John Misick just before the election and said that there was no way, I'm paraphrasing, and all of a sudden now he won, and it's a different sort of attitude. No, I think they'd like the revenue, but it's not going to happen.
So, John, why do you think the change?
You know what a difference a 20-point victory can make there, Rob. You know, Scott Wagner was opposed to it. It would have become a thing in his re-election race. Tom Wolf came in to see us. He said that he didn't think the state was ready, and we asked him what he meant by the state not being ready. He said, "I'm not ready." But apparently now in December, he's perfectly ready to do that. I think RJ has nailed it. That it's going to be a real tough row for them to hoe in the legislature.
As a Republican, Charlie, you've never been against this.
I've never been against it, and it is going to be a tough road right now, but I'm telling you, it's the march to the inevitable. The fact that Governor Wolf could turn around in 100 days, the General Assembly will turn around in 1,000 days. This will happen at some point in the relatively near future in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, curiously, it's one of those things that you would expect the reverse, but Charlie's for recreational marijuana.
We've talked about it a lot.
And I remain opposed to it. I just don't think we're ready for it yet. But you might be right. It might be inevitable because it's driven by the
there's
market.
going to be a fiscal inevitability here. The IFO said there's a 1.5 billion to 1.7 billion hole going into the next fiscal year. There's going to be a borrowing bill that comes due from the tobacco settlement. They're going to be upending the couch cushions looking for revenue.
And last I saw that we actually have more marijuana smokers now in the state than we do cigarette smokers. So that there's going to be
especially at this table.
Right.
Speak for yourself, Governor.
Careful where you go.
I'm quite certain I have no idea what you're talking about.
I always wondered what those gummy bears were you were eating.
A softball for the Republican side, though. The governor set up a commission to talk about districts in Pennsylvania. Do you think this is going to work? Some Republicans have spoken out against this, Charlie, saying
give you a long television-like answer. No. I mean, this is political posturing on the part of the governor, and you expect that from him. Right. And so this is just a little bit more. It will have no force and effect, thank goodness.
RJ.
Yeah, I agree with Charlie on
just
that.
a no.
Yeah. Well, as you would expect, I disagree. I think it was a legitimate attempt to put together a bipartisan group of people to take a look at it. But the reality is that the leadership isn't buying it. They would rather keep it in-house, so they're not going to support the governor.
And the reality is that the Constitution is very clear that it's the legislature, not some governor-appointed commission that's responsible for this.
I mean, but in the absence of legislative action from this last term, it's at least a way to keep the conversation going. Because as we head into 19 and 20, there'll be a new census, another round of legislative redraw. And I agree with you that it doesn't have any actual impact, but as a way to keep a conversation going about an important issue, I think it was the right thing to do.
I got a minute left. I'm going to go around the horn. Short answers. RJ, the most important thing the legislature should pick up in 2019, and the thing they actually will.
Corporate tax rate. I really, think they have to do something about that. We have businesses still leaving the state over that.
What do you think they will take up?
They'll take up the severance tax, but it won't happen.
Charlie.
I tend to agree with RJ. Keep taxes down. If you tax something, you get less of it. The Pennsylvania General Assembly, I think, understands that. I hope Governor Wolf will figure it out.
John, what do you want them to take up, and do you think they will?
All right, it's going to be a difficult fiscal picture. It's going to be a long budget season. I think we're going to be here post-June 30th talking about how they're going to fill holes in the budget. In the wake of U.S. Senate action just the other day on that First Step Act, it was nice to see them come back and take a crack at further sentencing reform in Pennsylvania and try to cut down on corrections costs.
All right, Mark.
I'd like to see education reform. I would hope that the governor would seize the second term and not turn it into a lame duck session immediately and do something substantive on education.
All right, and we will be here to cover it all for you. You're watching Face the State right here on CBS 21. From all of us, happy holidays.